So I was thinking we'd first talk about some common like functions and things you should know for the test and things like that. And then maybe we'd look at some online exercises and y'all can maybe follow along with me on those and get some practice. And then if there's any questions you have or any problems that you haven't been able to figure out or anything like that, we can talk about that as well. Um, so there's certain things that y'all can expect to see on your test. So obviously you need to know how to work with strings, and working with strings is inherently going to involve for loops. So if you are not familiar with for and while loops, or you're having any difficulty with those, y'all should let me know. We can speak privately about that if you need to, or we can all talk. If you ask a question, we can all talk about it together. Um, So there are a lot of common string functions that I think y'all are probably all aware of. What are some functions that you would use when you're talking about strings? Yeah, that's a good one. So dot lower, and do you know the syntax for dot lower? Is it the string name dot lower or? Yeah. Um, so what's another one? Yep. Yeah. So split dot upper. Okay. So join. What else? Yeah, that's a good one. There's is digit as well. These are important to know because you only have so much time in your exam, and I think this is normally also the way you did these was by using these functions. So if you're familiar with these functions and how they work, it'll be a lot easier. You should make sure you've reviewed the syntax for the function and you know how they work. Like for instance, with the lower function, it's the name of the string. So say we have a string s, then it's s dot lower, and you always have to remember your parentheses for function call. Um, so a mistake that I see a lot is that people will write a function and then they do some sort of function. They def my function, and then in here they'll do a few lines of code, and then they'll run their program, and it won't run, or it does run actually, but they don't think it runs. They're like, why isn't it doing anything? And whenever you write a function, what do you have to do if you want to execute that function? Yeah, you have to call the function by its name. So you do the function name, and remember you have to be at the same level of indentation, because if you're indented inside of the function definition, then the function call won't do anything. So you do the function name, um, and you have to remember your parentheses. That'll do your function call. And so you should make sure to review the syntax for all of the common functions because uh, some of them work a little bit differently. Like, uh, let's see. Um, and you also know how to get to a particular point in a string, right? Like if you want the third letter in a string, how would you do that? What's up? Yeah, so the index of the string, right? Yeah. So if I want if I have a string, I don't know, cat, and I want the second letter of that string, then I would do, and I would do cat 2, right? Actually, not. If I want the second letter of the string, it'd be cat 1, because string indices start at 0, right? And also, it's not going to do me any good to just get that. I have to store it somewhere, right? So I would say like s equals cat 1, and then I would have that string indice there. And then like if I wanted to, for example, if I wanted to iterate through the whole string, then I would need a for loop, right? And if I wanted to check every letter and see if it was actually a letter, I would have to, I'd need a for loop, and I'd have to say like for I in range from 0 to length. Oh, that's another good function we didn't mention here. Is there's I believe it's length is the function for Python.
Len.
Len, yeah. So len. So you definitely want to be familiar with len, because otherwise you won't know when to stop your iteration with your for loop. So that's a good thing to remember. Because if you don't know how to stop, then you'll get an error when you run your for loop, and then your program won't run correctly. And that's another. Sorry, I know I'm a little all over the place, but anytime if you're having an error with your program, you want to program very incrementally. So that means you do a couple lines of code, and then you run it and you check and make sure it's working. You do a couple more lines, you run it, you check it, make sure it's working, and that way when you do run into an error, you know exactly where that error is, and you're able to just debug those like 2 or 3 lines of code, and it doesn't take very long, because if you've written 20, 30, 40 lines of code and then you have an error, you may spend the whole test period trying to debug that code and not be able to figure out what's wrong. So that's not great. So definitely program incrementally. And when you do have an error, if you cannot fix the error, it is better to have, at least in my opinion, it's better to have the program running and not working correctly than it is to have it not running at all because you have an error. Because you can only get, I think, at most 50% credit in most of your classes for a program with an error. So don't do that. I've seen people submit programs with errors before. It's not a good thing. Let's see. So make sure you review strings. We'll talk about that more. Ask me if you have questions about strings. So another important thing here is file layout. So I'm going to just erase this stuff if you don't mind. So I would say, yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to. So all of this stuff is stuff that you're likely going to see on your test. So you can, if nothing else, you can kind of take notes about like what we go over just in terms of what you should expect to see on the exam. Now that doesn't mean this is everything that's going to be on the exam or that all of it is going to show up on the exam. I'm just saying these are things that are likely going to be on your exam. So file, everyone knows how to open a file? So you use the open, right? Okay. What's that?
That's on C.
Okay. You like the blue better? Yeah, I mean, I know neither of them are great, but should I write larger?
What's wrong with the red one?
It's also hard to see. If we had a black marker, that would be good. So it is good to have a try except statement. So it's definitely a good thing to do. I don't think it's 100% required. Like it should run even without the try except, but the problem is If you open the file without a try except and you're not sure that it's always going to work, then your program may not run. So I would do a try except. So when we open the file, we have a couple of like arguments that we can add there, right? Or rather, we need the file path, which can either be relative or absolute. Do y'all know the difference between a relative and an absolute path? Slightly. So a relative path basically just means it's relative to some location, which generally means it's relative to the location where your Python file is. So that means, thank you. So if I've got my Python file in C my Python apps, and then in that location is my Python source code. Then if I have a file that I want to open, if I put that file in the same exact location, C my Python apps, then I can just specify the name of the file as a string, and I'll be able to open it. But if, and in fact, and so that's called the relative path because it's relative to where my source code is at. But the alternative is the absolute path, which is saying from the root directory, so from my C drive, specify C my Python apps instead of just the name. So I have to have C my Python apps and then the name. All of that is a string. You don't normally want to do that because the path can be different on different machines. Like just because you're not going to send them your whole file structure, you're just sending them your Python code and maybe the file to open, but you're not sending them your file structure. So the relative path is generally better. So just make sure your file is in the same location and then just do the name of the file. Just like that. And then, of course, you have to use a variable as normal. So f is going to be my file variable. So now we've opened the file. Hold on a moment. And then there are a few functions for reading from a file in Python. Do y'all know the functions to read the file once you have it open?
Once you have it open, you gotta put dot read, and then read is one of the functions.
So in this case, our file path is, or our file is f, right? So we would do f.read. Or, so what does f.read return?
It returns the text of the whole file.
Yeah. So what other functions could we use to make this easier on ourselves? Read lines. All right, that's a good one. And what does read lines return?
A list of lines.
A list of.
A list of each line.
So each line is a string, right? And it returns. So it actually returns. Yeah, like you said, a list. I was going to say an array, but in Python it's a list. And so if I want the first line of my file, so like say we we make a variable called document, and it's equal to f.readlines, then document now stores, I guess that's too small, but document now stores a list, right? And so if we want the first line of the file, what would we do? Yeah, document 0. So line 1 is equal to line 1 is equal to document 0. And so that applies to the whole list. Like any line in that document, you can get Did you have a question?
Yes, would you need to use square brackets for example?
Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad. Oh, another thing, when we're opening a file, normally we don't just do the name. We're going to add a character, right? So if you want to read the file, it's R. If you want to write the file, it's W. There are a lot of others you can use, like I believe it's A for append. But I think for your purposes, you'll probably be all right with R and W. Always make sure you close the file after you open it. Let's see. So, let's see. What else? I believe there's another read function. Line, yeah. If you just want one line. Yep. So you could do like a for loop and do read line over and over again if you wanted. Okay, so are you guys very comfortable with functions? Yeah. Okay. A little iffy. All right. Do you all know what what a parameter is? Okay. So what's a parameter?
Apparently something you would have into the when you put the line in the
Yeah. And what does that mean though when you give it a parameter? Yeah, that it expects your function expects a piece of information for each parameter. Now Python's dynamically typed, so you don't have to, or loosely typed, so you don't have to tell it what the type of that information is going to be, but you should know, and your name should usually be informative about what sort of data you're expecting, so that it's easier for other people to read your code. Um, and then what's the difference between a parameter and an argument? Uh, So an argument is, this may be what you mean, but an argument is the information that you give the function when you call it. Yeah. So if I've defined, like before, a function called my function, and then I want to call, but say that function has two arguments, like num1 and num2. See, this is being informative with your naming because someone knows that these should be some sort of number, an integer or a double or something. Uh, so at least they know that you're expecting something of that sort and not a string. Um, and so when I call that function, which we said was my function, um, then I'm going to have to give it two matching pieces of information. So like 7 and 5. Right? So some people get stuck on this. So make sure that, like we said, you define your function and then you always make sure your indentation is right. Anything that's inside of a function definition will never happen on its own. You have to call the function outside of the function because some people will not forget, they will forget to unindent and they'll do their function call inside of the function definition and that doesn't do anything because you still haven't called the function. Um, Now, so another really common thing I see is people get confused about the difference between print and return, and sometimes they don't read the instructions very carefully, and they just assume uh, that they want a print statement. So you need to be very careful about a certain key. There are a lot of keywords, like if it says when write a function that takes three integers or something. Takes means it needs parameters, right? It's going to accept arguments. Write a function that returns a double. So in that case, you have to have a return statement. You probably don't need a print statement. Write a function that prints the results of the addition. Then you have a print statement. You can have both a print and a return, but remember, a return is always going to end your function. So you can have more than one return in a function, but you'll only ever return one time. I don't know that it matters to you guys, but because you probably don't want to do anything more complicated than necessary on your final, because that's just more errors that can happen. But if it does matter, you can return things other than strings and doubles. Like you can return a list, for instance. So you can write a function and say, well, I've got several pieces of information that I'd like to return from this function. How can I do that? You can return a list, but then you have to unpack the list after you return it. So you get that you return that list, you store it in a variable, and then you have to go through that, iterate through that list with a for loop or while loop, and get each individual piece of information and store them where they're supposed to go. So you can do that. Nothing wrong with that, but I wouldn't do it unless you're sure you need to, because it is another layer of complexity. And so, let's see. So, I was thinking we might look at a couple of exercises online. So, if y'all are interested, let's. So I was gonna go. There's this website called Coding Bat that I like. So y'all can all go to Coding Bat if you're interested. What's that? Coding Bat. So like coding, CODING, and then bat, like a bat, BAT, like Batman. Okay, and then it says Java and Python. So just click on the tab that says Python, and then so y'all are doing strings and you're doing lists. So it's got two sets of exercises for strings, two sets of exercises for list, and then logic is always good, because really the biggest thing you're learning in a programming class is how to think like a programmer and solve problems. So I feel like these logic ones are good as well. But I feel like the most applicable things to you will be the string and list exercises. And some of these I don't remember for certain, but I think some of these will incorporate loops as well. Um, uh, so like this first one, hello name, given a string name, e.g. Bob, return a greeting of the form hello Bob. Does anybody know off the top of their head how they do that one? So
you have to use it.
we're in string one.
String one.
So so if y'all have all seen it, there's oh, I should try to get that projector turned on. If anyone looks at this later, they'll be able to see too. Let's see. Is there actually projector controls? I'll be right back.
This is fun. Okay. So here's one.
That one doesn't work, it's Epson and that's Epson.
Hey. Okay. Oh, I normally see the touch screen displays
Oh yeah, this one doesn't have.
Okay.
I wish it did.
So you used this before? Let's see.
It's flashing. But
It's promising.
yeah, I hear a fan kicking up. So are these the students I should just give an A to and let them stay in
Yeah,
the
definitely. Okay, so we talked about, so we just mentioned this one is given a string name, e.g. Bob, return a greeting in the form of hello Bob. So this is just a simple return statement inside of a function. So you just return uh, like, or actually, I think in this case, even though it says, so if I was given this, I would do a return. I think it actually expects a print here. But that would either be return the variable name, it would be return hello name, or return print, or print hello name, depending on what you expect. But normally, if a problem says to return something, I would use a return statement. Let's see. You missed most of the lecture, Joey. It's okay. So we're just looking at a couple of these problems online too. So I'm not sure if any of these include loops, but maybe. Okay. Here we go. All right. So it looks like string 2 has loops. So like right here, we've got in the string 2 set of problems, we've got the problem count high. Return the number of times that the string high appears anywhere in the given string. So it's count. And then there's some examples. So how would we go about solving this? Count high. Yeah. So we probably need a for loop, right? Or a while loop. For loop. All right. Oh. So for the for loop, no, go ahead. Tell me. For what? For
X and oh, we need parentheses after four.
hmm?
Do we need parentheses? Okay. For X and string.
Okay. I think we need.
Well, it's also a family.
So let me know if I make any syntax errors. I'm not 100%. I haven't done Python coding in a little while, so I'm a little rusty with the syntax. For X in string, all right. So we're saying we have a string called string, and you're saying for each letter in there, check the letter, right?
For each time it says how.
Well, yeah, but X in string it means each is referring to an element of string. So you're saying check each character. That's what X is saying.
Right.
X is a character in the string. And so how do we check how many times that high will appear? So we're looping through it, so that's a good start. So does anyone have an idea? Yeah. No, I don't. Well, I mean, that might work. How would we do it if we were going to do it ourselves, though, and we weren't going to use a function? If we were going to write the code ourselves?
Split.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that would work, but again, I said, like, what if we wanted to write our own? If we wanted to solve this ourselves, we didn't have a convenient Python function to solve this for us, and we were going to write our own code to solve it.
Or if you for X lunch.
Yeah. So we could do. Um, for I in range, right? What is that? So 0 to len of the string. Is that the right syntax, guys? Okay, and so we're saying for I in range from 0 to the length of the string, and then we're going to say, so yeah, if string I is equal to h, then yeah, uh, if string I plus 1, my plus key does not work. Hold on. Equals I, then in that case, what do we have to do? So we're saying I is equal to h, and yeah, so count 1. Now, I think that we'll probably have an issue because we haven't previously defined count. I'm not sure, so we might have to go up before our for loop and just go ahead and give count like a definition. But we can check. And then, but in any case, so we're going to iterate through the whole thing that way, and we're going to check for highs. And then at the end, it says return the number of times. So we need a return statement, right? Okay. So return count. Okay. It says, oh, and we need quotation marks around our letters. Yeah, and like I thought, so we do have to go ahead and just declare count. Yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. Count is equal to 0. Okay. We probably need -1 for the length of the string because the range function might be inclusive. Or rather than that, actually what it is because we're checking I plus 1, it's 1 higher. So we need to do it. All right, cool. All right, so that's a simple example of using a for loop to evaluate a string, and you're not just using the functions that are built in. So this way, no matter what sort of problem that you're presented with, you can write a solution, even if there's not a convenient function to solve it for you. Yes. Yeah, so it is actually, it's exclusive, like you said. So the second part does not include the last indice, or it doesn't include the last number. But because we start at 0, this will go all the way up until the very last element in the string. But then when we check to see if I plus 1 is equal to something, I plus 1 is going to be 1 past the end. And so it'll cause an out of bounds exception. Yeah, because I will at that point be the last character. So when you add 1 to it, it causes an exception. And so that's why we just do -1. That way, the last character we check to see if it's H is the one before the last one. Because we don't need to check to see if the last one's H, because there's no way it could be high. Does that make sense? If the last character is an H, then it can't. There's nowhere for an I to be after it. Yeah. All right. So I think that's about all I have for you. I guess one quick note on like what a list is. A list is just like an ordered collection of elements, generally of the same type, but I don't think that's a hard requirement. So I think we briefly mentioned it, but y'all all know how lists work, right? You have like B, C, F, A, and goes like 0, 1, 2, 3. Anyways, I think that's pretty much all I have for you. I'd encourage you to go through all those coding bed exercises. And if you have any questions, there'll be tutors in the lab all day today and pretty much all week. And they'll be happy to help you with any questions. Do any of y'all have any questions for me right now?
I can talk to you about going a little more depth into for loops and while loops.
Okay. Sure. Do you have any particular questions that I could go ahead and address them for everybody? Anything you can think of?
So one of the things in the last implement program that we had to pass information into a list.
Yes.
I didn't use my while loop correctly, and it just kept on printing out what I was trying to put in the list every time. So is there any way you have any tips for that?
Okay, say that again. I'm sorry.
So we had to use an input to pass information to a list.
Okay.
But I didn't use my while loop correctly.
Okay.
It just kept on printing, like adding what I was trying to put into the string each and every time.
So,
That makes any sense?
kind of. I mean, I'd probably need to see your exercise to tell you exactly. But in a while loop, were you infinite looping? Or?
Yes, it was infinite loop.
Okay, it was infinite looping. So a while loop is a block of code that runs until the stopping condition happens. So it has to be possible for that to happen. Because I've seen a lot of while loops where they're like while test equals true or whatever, and then nowhere is there an if statement where they don't say if such and such test equals false. They just leave it like this. This will run forever, no matter what you do. So that's not great.
Okay.
So make sure you're not having an infinite loop. And then if you're taking input inside of a while loop, that is fine, but I guess just I'd probably have to see your specific question to give you more detail about it, but make sure you're not infinite looping, and then remember that you have to, if you need to do different things in the while loop each time, you're gonna have to make proper use of your if statements.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you show me a specific problem, I can give you a more concrete example.
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad.
All right, I'm gonna turn off my recording now. So, let's see.